The best change leaders are not the ones with the best plans. They're the ones who create the condition where the best thinking can emerge. What if we didn't have to come and tell people, here is why you need to implement AI and why we need to do this and why we need to move. And instead we move from selling the vision to designing questions that help people find a reason.
Welcome to Change Leadership Conversations, where we explore how executives, change leaders, and organizations are leading and responding to change in today's world of work. I'm Yvonne Ruke Akpoveta, Executive Change Advisor and founder of The Change Leadership. At The Change Leadership, we curate workshops, conferences, content, courses, and community experiences designed to build change leadership capability in professionals and organizations. Today's conversation is a little different. It comes directly from the Change Leadership Conference, where leading thinkers, practitioners, and change leaders come together to challenge conventional thinking and explore what it really takes to lead change in an increasingly uncertain and disruptive world. As AI shapes work, technology accelerates disruption, and organizations face continuous transformation, one thing has become clear: the way we lead change has to change too. In this conversation, I explore what it means to imagine how we lead, navigate, and adapt through change. I invite you to hit the follow button and stay connected to our global change leadership community.
Some of us new to change management. Some of us have been doing it for 20 years. I've been doing it for over 20 years. What we've all been taught to do is drive change. They bring us into the organization, drive change. What if that was never the job? What if the job was never to drive change? Can you imagine that? The old model tells us, design the plan, right? If anybody's ever gone for an interview, the first thing they ask you, tell us about how you're going to do the change management plan. Build the case. What's your business case for change, right? That's it. Or communicate the vision. We have to communicate the vision. Or manage resistance to change, our favorite. How do we manage resistance to change? That is the bane of being a change manager, right? Or a change leader. The resistance to change, the dreaded one. Or what I even love to say, I can help you get buy-in for change. That's the magic word. Everybody wants buy-in to their change. You want to be able to go in there and people say, yes, we're all on board with the change. In this old model, everything we did came through us. We were responsible for everything. To design the plan, to build the case, to communicate the vision, to manage resistance to change. What if the new world was asking us to be different? To imagine the way we lead change? How would we feel if the change didn't have to flow through us? If we were no longer the heroes in the story? If we made our stakeholders the heroes in the story? What if things didn't have to rely on us? What if we didn't even have to be in the room for that change to move? Would it get rid of burnout? Would it get rid of all of those things that stress us out? The truth about the old model is that we probably asked for buy-in too late. When are we asking for that buy-in? We ask people to buy in when the vision has been set, the timelines have been set, and we're coming to tell them, this is the change, this is what we need to do. Are we asking for buy-in too late? How are we selling that change? We confuse communication with engagement. Think about it. Are we informing them what needs to happen? Are we communicating with them? Are we engaging with them? Are we listening to what it is that needs to be done? The old way just said, share that information. I don't know about you. I've been in those rooms where they say, yes, we're communicating the change, but we get there and we say, we don't want to hear from them. Let's just tell them what to do. Because they're scared of what they're going to hear. We focus on the wrong people in the change and avoid the right ones. How many people have dreaded going into that meeting where you know they're going to ask so many questions? I've been in rooms or I've been asked to lead change initiatives where when you get in there, they say, let's not provide any Q&A time. Let's just tell them what they need to hear. Because guess what? They don't want pushback. It stresses them out because they feel they don't have the answers. Because they want to be the heroes in the room. But when you start to think about, I don't need to be the hero in the room because my stakeholder is the hero in the room, it changes the picture. Literally, I've been on calls or webinars where they say, let's mute the functionality button for listening. For people being able to talk, let's not provide that functionality. That's the old way of doing things. But that's the truth in terms of how we've led change in the past. Because we want it to flow easy. We want those people in the room that are going to agree with what it is that we're saying. And those people that will not agree, we label them as resistors to change. What if we could introduce a reimagination of how we lead change? What if we could reimagine what the future could be like? The old model worked. The change plan works. The methodologies work. The frameworks work. The communications plan work. But they worked for a different world. The world we're moving in now, it's no longer about the episodic change where it starts and finishes. The environment we're living in right now is change, and it's too much responsibility on one person to lead that change. What if we started to think, instead of telling them the benefits, you created conditions where they discovered the benefits for themselves? What if they were able to discover how that change could benefit them? Guess what? Nobody argues with their own conclusion. We all want to be right. Have you ever been in a discussion with someone and you're trying to put your point forward and why you're right? So imagine the reimagination where somebody comes up with the benefits by themselves of why that change is right. What are they going to do? They're going to go out of their way to make sure that change is successful. That's the reimagination we need. Not telling people what they need to do, but creating that shift where they begin to say, this is what we need to do to make this change happen. Imagine how easy your lives would be. That's how you get engaged stakeholders. That's how you get change champions. That's how you get change agents, people who you empower to lead the change. Think about that. Think about that shift, where we move from selling the vision to designing questions that help people find a reason. What if we didn't have to come and tell people, here is why you need to implement AI and why we need to do this and why we need to move with the times. And then instead you said to them, tell me a little bit about your job. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How can AI help us? What if AI could take away some of these things that you didn't really like about the job? What if AI could even help enhance these things you love about the job? When you start asking them the questions, as opposed to telling them what needs to be done. Think about that. When you start co-designing the change with them, then what happens? They begin to own the change. That's a different mindset shift that we need to start to think about. What if we move from managing resistance to reading resistance as a strategy? I remember this change I was leading a while back, and the director was seen as pushy. You know, that stakeholder that comes in the room and everybody just tightens up a little, rolls their eyes, but nobody took the time to listen to why perhaps they were being resistant to the change. When I got to sit with this person, because when you're brought into an organization, you have no biases, you don't have preconceived ideas, right? So you get to listen to that person. And I started to speak to them and they said, 3 years ago, this change happened. They were blindsided and they went on to say what happened. So now they become a little bit, in quotes, resistant, but they were just being protective because of their experience. And then the minute I was able to identify what the issue was that was seen as resistance, guess what? It made life easier because I could now bring them along with me. I could help address those concerns they had. And they could see me as an ally. And they were more willing to go on the journey. That's the difference when you start to welcome resistance to change. Because guess what resistance to change tells us? That is a gap, that something is missing. If you don't have resistance to change, then that's where the issue is. Because the resistance tells us a story. It tells us how to design our change plan. It tells us how to design our strategy. It tells us how to design our approach. That's why we need to welcome resistance to change and not try to kill it like we want to do and avoid it. What if we move from owning the plan to distributing ownership to people, to empowering other people to lead change? And what I love about this room today is that it's not just change managers. We have HR, we have transformation, we have executives in here, we have senior managers, people leaders, project managers, project coordinators, everybody. Because when we start to move the leading of the change to the people, it builds collective capability on the organization. And that's the shift we need to make. Instead of taking the responsibility all on ourselves and burning ourselves out, but collectively leading that change together. That's the reimagination we need to think about when we say building stakeholder buy-in. Because when we say building stakeholder buy-in, building organizational buy-in, we want the methodologies, we want the easy path. And yes, this is the easy path to make it happen when you take people along on the journey. I want us to pause for a minute. Think about a change you're leading right now. What would shift if your job was not to drive that change like you've been trained to do? That would be hard. You know why it would be hard? Because when you're hired as a change leader or a change manager, you're given that responsibility to drive that change. But what if you empowered others to do it? What if you did it as a team? What if you did it collaboratively? What if you created the conditions and the environment for people to lead the change? What would that look like? Because in the world we live in, change is happening so quickly that we cannot wait for that one change manager to come and save the world, that one change manager to be the hero. So when we start to really build change capability across board, it makes the difference. We spoke earlier about the change flowing through us, the plans flowing through us, the communications plans flowing through us. But what if we were like a river, water in the river that just flows through the change? When a river flows, what do we see? The rocks, the bends, the trees. There's no methodology or framework or plan in terms of how that water flows. It just flows and adapts. What if we were water flowing through and adapting to how the change needs to be? When we face resistance, we adapt. When we face those bends, we figure out what's next, what do we need to do. That's the new world of change that we're leading in, one where we're more adaptable. The best change leaders are not the ones with the best plans. They're the ones who create the condition where the best thinking can emerge. The best change leaders are those that are willing to be courageous, willing to be adaptive, willing to take people along, those who are willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Those are the best change leaders. And that's what we're calling on you today, to be the best version of yourselves, not anything different.
This is the most voted question currently at the top of the list. How can we best address and perhaps minimize change fatigue, especially in the age of AI?
Can I say that's easy? It's two things, and we already spoke about it. One, AI is coming, and yes, there's no getting away from it. But it's flipping the script in terms of how we think about change fatigue. And I'm not going to say change resilience, because people always say, oh yeah, be resilient. So it's not about being resilient to that change, but it's about building change capability across board. What I love is when organizations bring me in to train, they're also training their people to say, how do we navigate change? Are you training people how to navigate this change, or are you just expecting them to get on with it? When we start to think about change as a state, we are living in, let's call it uncertain times, changing times. Change is never going to be slower, and it's just gotten faster and faster. So it's that switching mindset. And then as leaders who are leading people through change, as change managers, people managers, it's also about building capability to navigate that change and helping people build their resistance. And then the last one I said about welcoming AI. What can AI do for me? As opposed to thinking, what can AI do to me? That shift in mindset is so key. It's not what AI is doing to you, it's what can AI do for me? That's what's key. It's building that capacity, that environment for seeing change as constant, the uncertain environment and capability. So I think that's a great note to end on. Let's build capacity, let's build capability for change.
Thank you for listening to the Change Leadership Conversations. Be sure to hit the follow button, leave us a review, and share this podcast with your team or fellow change leaders, because leading change is better when we do it together.